This conference is brought to you by CallStack, your React and React Native development experts.
Thank you. All right, last talk, you almost made it. I just want to take a moment to thank CallStack and thank all the technicians, all the people making the food, our MC. Thanks so much for putting on a great conference. Thank you. All right, I'm Christoph. I just built a video game with JavaScript. I used to manage React Native. I sometimes do talks. I just did the exact same hand movement, so you can, nothing much changes, right? I also worked on Jest, so maybe you've used some of those. Now I work at Nakazawa Tech, which I set up as an open source company. Everything that Nakazawa Tech does, or almost everything, is open source. If you'd like to work with me, always open to awesome stuff that we could work on together. If it's open source, not open source, whatever it is, just reach out to me. Today, I'm going to talk about building scalable applications, which is like the most basic title for a talk you can imagine, because this is also what half of the other talks were about, more or less, right? So, do you want the spicy version of or the tame version? Spicy. Okay, don't sue me then. All right, I'm going to give you some tools today. I'm going to give you some open source projects, a bunch of stuff that you can use after this conference to get started really quickly to build the next big thing. Not just mobile, not just React, it's all the way full stack end to end. First off, we should define what scalable means. Obviously, we could come up with metrics, right? Things should be fast, always. They should be fast to develop, fast to deploy, should be fast for the user. I'm not gonna go with metrics, we can define them, but it's not that useful. One thing that I like is that we can move fast with reliable, proven libraries. You know, no seg faults in production, please. I want end-to-end type safety all the way from the database with a great developer experience down to the client. Ideally, it scales from one person to like 1,000 people team when you're developing. And one thing that I've really come to love is global order and local chaos. So you want to develop within a system that has global order. Everything is set up, everything works well, everything feels good, like there's no mess. But then you can still have a component file that is like 2,000 lines of code that only like one team really understands, as long as that doesn't affect the rest of the system negatively by making it slower, breaking CI, or slowing down other engineers. And the nice thing about that is that it should usually then enable few context switches, so you can stay in the flow state and in focus longer. And with all of that, I'll show you how to maximize local reasoning. And then finally, it's always best, you know, I think open source clearly has won, so you want to build on top of open source software, because when you don't control the stack that you're building on, you're never in for a good time. And finally, the thing that I really care about is to build something with good taste, right? Like, what's the point if all the code you're writing just sucks? If everything you're just vibe coding and then you're just rewriting that code, all that slop into something that kind of works? I want to build on a platform with good taste. But where do I start, right? When we're building a mobile app, there's so many decisions to make. You know, obviously we're at React Universe, so we're going to use React Native. We're probably going to use Expo. We're now probably going to use the new architecture, right? If we can, if all the libraries are updated. But then which navigation stack am I using? Which list view? Legend list, obviously, right? Are the versions compatible of the packages that I'm using? Or am I using something that's old and I have to fall back to the old architecture? All that sort of stuff. How do you make it fast? How do you do internationalization? Just too many decisions. And it takes like a week or two to set up just a project and install. Even if you're starting with Expo, you have to install so many packages just to get started and do anything. So unfortunately, the best name for a framework is already taken. It's called Rock. So I'm just going to leave you with this Expo app template for now. I'm thinking maybe instead of Rock, I could call it Sock. But you shouldn't let me name things. So if you have a better idea for what to call this stack, maybe come to me later and help me out. So the cool thing is that this is like the most modern and up-to-date template using Expo to get started, and it comes with a lot of stuff. I would say it's like 15 years of knowledge distilled into this template. And it comes with a bunch of things. Foundation, really boring stuff. TypeScript, yeah, right. Like maybe a few years ago that wasn't obvious. Now it's totally obvious. ESLint and Prettier, also boring. PNPM as package manager, it's just the best one out there. Don't bother using anything else. One of the cool things about PNPM is that it has patch package directly built in, so you don't have to install a package to patch other packages. VTest for testing, and the template is using ESM because why would you start out with a new project using common.js? And now a bunch of you have also said, that's so boring, right? There are faster tools out there. I want to rewrite everything in Rust, so much better. But for everything I'm going to tell you about today, please give it 5 minutes, okay? So first off, everything is hyper-optimized. Prettier uses the experimental CLI. It's been experimental for like 2.5 years. It's not experimental, it's fantastic. And now actually it's using the OXC Rust JavaScript parser. So the parser for Prettier is written in Rust. You can enable that if you're using this template, it's all there. So maybe it's great to have some things written in Rust, but you can stick with JavaScript tools and make them fast. There's npm run all that runs lint, test, TypeScript, everything in parallel. It's actually npm run all too, because the first version kind of sucks, so some people made a second one. And then ESLint, people are like, oh my god, use Biome, use Oxlint or whatever. The problem with ESLint being slow is that the defaults suck and that people don't know how to set it up. And also, you have like, I don't know how many cores in your computer, and you're running it in parallel, like in a single CPU thread instead of parallelizing it. But also, what does it matter if ESLint takes 1 or 5 seconds if your tests take 16 minutes, right? And then there's all this stuff like ESLint and Prettier have a -- cache flag to only run on files that have been changed. Why do you keep running ESLint and Prettier on files that haven't been changed for like 5 years? It's also based on an ESLint config that's on Nakazawa Tech's GitHub org and on NPM under Nakazawa. I heard that Oxlint will support ESLint plugins. We'll see. I'll switch over to that when that's the time. But the problem is just with all these, there's 2 competing Rust implementations of ESLint now. They're fast, that's great, but they're not fully complete. They don't do everything. Same with all the Rust-based formatters. They don't like format GraphQL inside of JavaScript or CSS in JS, or if and like there's all this stuff where you have compatibility issues. Yes, they're fast, but they're all incomplete. I'll switch to better ones when they're there. But these tools, with them, you can move fast and they'll never get in the way. Let me just show you. This is the philosophy and the principles for the ESLint plugin. So first off, error and never warn. There's no point in having warnings in a linter because developers ignore it, and then you have like 10,000 warnings in your project, and it's like, cool, so I guess those are not problems, so just get rid of the warnings, right? So this plugin will force you to deal with whatever it says in an error. The great thing is it comes with auto fixers, so either it's just going to fix it for you, or if not, then you have an actual bug that you need to fix. Everything else doesn't matter. It enforces a strict, consistent code style, not the actual, tabs or spaces or whatever, but it's going to make sure you're using the same API for the same thing every time to make sure that your app looks consistent no matter who writes it. For example, one thing that's really slow in ESLint is no unused vars. Or when you're using TypeScript, then it's TypeScript ESLint, no unused vars, because then you disable one, have to use the other, but then maybe you run even both of them. But that kind of stuff can take easily 20 to 30% of the time that ESLint takes to run. The problem is it takes a really long time to figure out if a variable is used within a file or not. But we're using TypeScript, which is already tracking all this information for us for free. And it's, for some reason, this option called no unused locals in TypeScript is not on by default. It should be. So when you're using this ESLint plugin, all this no unused var stuff is just disabled. And if you're using the templates that I'm showing you, no unused locals is enabled in TypeScript. Much faster. Yeah, and it doesn't get into the way. So anything too subjective or opinionated is not there. Like, who can imagine what this link might go, where this link might go to? What's like the most subjective and opinionated set of ESLint rules? Yeah, right there. I'm not going to say it. This is like when I'm actually coding. So one of the cool things here is that whenever you're writing code, you have to decide, where do I put my props or object keys? Do I put them at the bottom? Do I alphabetically sort them? Do I sort them by length or whatever? And then you review somebody else's code and you're like, I absolutely hate how you're inserting props at the bottom. But also you have merge conflicts because everybody adds them to the bottom and it's really hard to read. With this ESLint plugin, I just don't even care. I just click wherever I am in a React component, just type out my component, and whenever I hit save, it just formats it automatically. That way, it's always consistent. Everyone writes code on this app, and it's going to always look the same. And the great thing is also gzip compresses better because everything is in order. All right, now we're going to start getting into the more interesting bits. So it comes with Expo 53 and React Native 79, soon Expo 54. It's recommending to use Expo Router. I don't like it, but all the other solutions are way worse, so it's good to use. Same with Nativewind and Tailwind. I don't really like Tailwind, but in React Native, it's just the best experience. Like style sheets in JavaScript, maybe that was necessary 10 years ago to kick off React Native, and we didn't have the technology to do something like Tailwind, but Nativewind is just the best. I might revise this statement that Uniwind is the best soon, so I'm waiting for that. That was announced today. I'll show you this cool stack component. React compiler is enabled. And then there's this library called FBT for internationalization. So this is how I'm going to sell you. If you're not using Nativewind yet, this is how I'm going to sell you. Whenever you want to make something pressable, you pass in like a render function, and then you have like curly brace, parentheses, curly brace, breast. And it's so hard to type. Maybe the LLMs don't get it wrong, but I get it wrong all the time. And it's so much pain. It's so unusable, this API. The nice thing about Nativewind is you just add a class name, active:opacity50. Those two examples are equivalent. It's just so much less visual overhead, so much less clutter. And I'm really hoping that half of you at least are sold on this now. And then the stack component that I'm showing off makes everything even nicer. It has all these shorthand props to use to do flexbox in React Native, which then takes them out of the class name. That way you don't end up with these like gigantic class name strings with like Nativewind and Tailwind. It just takes them out, and it has really good defaults that are the same across the web and React Native. Because the problem is that, as you know, probably, flexbox on React Native has different defaults as on the web. For example, in React Native, it's vertical by default instead of horizontal. This is the stack component. This one is phenomenal. It's like very small amounts of code, like 1 kilobyte or something, and it works just so well. I would delay React Native 1.0 another 10 years just to make that happen. So maybe, if anyone's working on React Native, let's think about that. And then I mentioned this thing called FBT. What is FBT? So FBT is Facebook's internationalization library. That's what Facebook is using on everything that they're building. It was open sourced, but then abandoned. And I've always really loved it when I was working at Facebook. And I used it for everything in open source, even though it's really impossible to use because it was so outdated. So when I saw last November that it was abandoned, I did what any sane person would do and I forked it, and I spent 2 weeks rewriting it completely in TypeScript. And it's awesome. And it has inline translations. I don't know, who is managing internationalization by writing IDs and then having a JSON file or something somewhere else? Yeah, there's a bunch of people. Yeah, that's painful. Don't do that. Use FBT. It's awesome. I'll show you a more complex example. It just takes care of everything related to internationalization. So for example, it does plurals, it does lists, it does numbers, it does everything. There's a shiny website. I do admit half of this was vibe coded, but then I had to rewrite the other half. It's frustrating. Doesn't work. And if you're using FBT, pretty soon I'm going to launch a service. That's Nakazawa Tech is building this service called Relang. If you're using FBT, you install Relang, and then every time you add new strings, it will automatically send you a pull request on GitHub with all the translations for every language, every locale that you support. I'm using this already for Athena Crisis, the video game I'm building, and it's awesome. All right, Foundation Part 3, Legend List V2, updated today. I told you this template is always up to date. Legend List is awesome. Awesome talk earlier, Jay. SVG, I don't know, has anyone ever built an app without SVGs? There's two people, okay, yeah. All right, teach me. I have never built anything without SVGs. And you start a React Native app and it's like, how do I render an SVG? And it's like impossible. You install React Native SVG, which doesn't render SVGs, it just gives you React Native components to do SVG, which is not what anyone's doing either, right? And then you need to install the React Native SVG transformer and do some Metro Voodoo in the config. And then finally, you might be able to render an SVG file. But also, don't forget the viewbox prop on every one of your SVG files. Otherwise, you cannot resize them in React Native for some reason. I don't know. It's a mess. This template just solves it for you, so you don't have to spend a day setting that up. It has Scorehom's bottom sheet. There's nothing better yet, so we'll wait for that. And then one cool new thing, it's called Expo Build Disk Cache. I know there's EAS and it's cool, but when you're just starting out, man, it's so much faster to just compile locally the first few times. And the cool thing about this is that it doesn't recompile all the time locally. It will just use a local cache. You know, whenever you run pnpm iOS to like bring up the simulator, it's like, hey, CocoaPods is like outdated or something, I don't know. But this thing will be like, no, I actually just compiled the app, it's all good, I'll be done in a second. Phew. But now we also need a backend, right? Okay, what do you think that's called? Server template. Don't have a better name for that either, so maybe you can help me out. I really need some help. Cool. So this is a template for Prisma, Pothos, and a GraphQL server. Okay, now this is where I'm hoping that you'll give me 5 minutes. This is the Facebook stack. You know, the cynics here would say I was just chasing the Facebook stack. It has the same DevX setup. Everything I've talked about before is all the same. The cool thing is it instantly restarts on a file change. The way I'm actually coding is I don't save files on command save. I don't know why developers do that. Like all of you, you're building apps that auto-save every time somebody types into something. But as developers, like so many people insist to write command save, to type command save all the time. I just automatically save every 30 milliseconds as I'm typing. With this template, it instantly restarts your node server every time. This is what enables type safety from the database to the client. And the cool thing about GraphQL is that it's so perfect for mobile apps. I mean, that's why it was created initially at Facebook, is that it enables loose coupling. Sure, on the web, where you are fully in control of distribution, maybe you don't need that loose coupling. But for mobile apps, you don't own the distribution, right? Like there's a gatekeeper, there's the platform in between. You give them your app and say, hey, please put that live somewhere. And then they'll come back, no, your app sucks, please change it. Then you do that dance like a week or something. And then finally that app will be live. But then you never know what app version your clients or your users are using in production, right? So you need to make sure you don't ever make breaking changes. And GraphQL is so great because as long as you don't make a breaking change to that schema file, which is very easy to verify, your app is always going to work. On Athena Crisis, for example, I have people I'm sometimes like sneaky, I'm like, nobody's using this, and, you know, everybody's updated, and then maybe 6 months later, I remove some GraphQL thing that was deprecated, and then I immediately get sentry errors of like a bunch of people that haven't played for 6 months, they're just coming back to it, and it crashes because I removed it. So I try not to. So what's in the box to enable that? It's Prisma as the ORM. Some people don't like it. You can use Drizzle. It doesn't make a difference to me. I love it though. And Pothos, and I'm going to show you what that is if you've never seen it. That's amazing. That's just the missing link. And I think if Pothos had been available 10 years ago, everybody would still be using GraphQL, or GraphQL would be much bigger. It uses the Prisma JSON types generator. That way you can mark things in the database with a specific TypeScript type. It doesn't validate it, but through your entire system, it will carry that type through. So as long as nobody else outside is messing with your database, you can be sure that those types are always correct. It uses GraphQL Yoga and Hono as HTTP server and BetterAuth. Hono is just a new web server for Node, which is really fast. All right, let me show you the full example. So first, we define a Prisma schema. It's just a DSL. It's pretty simple. We have a user model. We define some fields like password, username, whatever. And then we use Pothos to define the GraphQL schema. With that, we just tell Pothos, hey, define a Prisma node that's called user, and a bunch of fields, like for example, display name, email, locale, and username. And in this case, email should only be visible to that same user, so it's like protected. The cool thing about Pothos is that if you have a typo, it will not let you compile that. TypeScript will fail and say, hey, in the database, there's no field with that name. That way you can never make mistakes. Everything is statically proven. So even before you run your app, you know if it's working or not. And it auto-generates this GraphQL schema for you. That's so sweet. That's cool. But now all we need is a GraphQL client, right? We're still working on this barrel. No barrel files. But we need to keep working. On this template that I showed you with Expo, there's a branch called with relay. If you start from that, you immediately have a full GraphQL client that's working and set up out of the box for you. So Relay is a GraphQL client built by Facebook. The problem with Relay is that you need a PhD from Mark Zuckerberg to be able to use it and install it. So you can use this template now, and you don't have to figure out how to install it. The cool thing about it is that it enables declarative queries instead of manual data fetches. Like you never think about, oh, when do I fetch my data? You just declare, hey, this is what my component needs. And when that component renders, that data is going to be there. And Relay guarantees that. The cool thing is it enables that you only have to do one query to your backend to render the whole page. I get so many people tell me, hey, isn't GraphQL slow? Isn't there so many issues? You have nested queries. And I'm like, yeah, maybe. But all I'm doing is one query to my backend while you do 50 REST requests to load the same page. So tell me which one has more overhead. Relay has built-in support for pagination and optimistic updates. And composable fragments enable local reasoning. So this is now where everything's going to come together. This is how you define a component with Relay. You just define a fragment. You say, hey, this is my user card, and all I need here is a display name, email, and username. And Relay will just make sure it's there. So you put this together, you have local reasoning. You define your data dependencies with Relay. You use a stack component to avoid some of the hassle. You use Nativewind to style everything, and then you use FPT for internationalization. And then you can hand that to the LLM, and they'll be able to figure it out too, because everything that you need to know to change this file is within that file. You never need to context switch. You never need to go anywhere else. You can change that file all within one place. And the same thing for the server. I showed you the Pothos part is that this is all you need to build the entire thing. And it's all type safe, all the way from your database, all the way to the client. All right. But what if we also need a web app? What do you think the next one is called? Anybody got any ideas? It'd be so funny if that had an actual name that was like super random, right? I don't have it, sorry. It's just called web app template. Yeah, same thing. Exact same setup. There's also a library template. Isn't it so hard to build a library these days? How are you going to compile it? I have no idea. You use this template, you just change the index.ts file, and you publish it to NPM, and you're good to go. It has the same DevX setup, except it uses ts down and roll up to compile stuff, which is super fast, can ship new packages to NPM quickly. All right, I've been talking about video games, so I can show you a quick demo about how this stack works for real. All right, so Athena Crisis is open source, but this part is not open source, so you cannot see that anywhere else. I have my Prisma schema here. Let's say this is a model for games. Games are individual games that people play on a specific map, and we can check if it is ended or not. Then we have the Pothos definitions here. Let's say I change this. Oops, it doesn't work. TypeScript will yell at me. Everything is typed fully from the database to the client. I'm exposing this as a Boolean. What happens when I expose this as a string? It doesn't work because ended in the database is a Boolean, so I cannot expose it as a string. Of course, I can make a resolver to resolve things as anything, but in this case, everything is fully type safe. It spits out this beautiful GraphQL. So as long as I don't make breaking changes to this file, everything's going to be good always. And then I have my client here. It looks a bit more complicated than in the example, but it's basically the same. OK, end doesn't work. Ended would work. This is my client. So as you can see, all the way from the database to the client, we have full type safety. And the sweet thing is that it's so easy to define relations. So for example, there are people, users, playing on a game on a map. So if we check out users, we have a related connection here. So this is a helper from Pothos that integrates Prisma and Relay. And with these few lines, we can turn that connection in that relation in the database into a full GraphQL connection that supports pagination, sorting, everything you need. And then you can query it like this. And this way, this entire component defines its entire data dependencies within one file, and you never need to look anywhere else if you're making changes. Phew, now we can chill out. 4 templates. This is what all the vibe coding tools are asking you when you open their website. Like, what do you want to create today? Yeah, that's what I got. One more quick thing, like as you have seen, I like to create everything from scratch. This entire presentation was built with something called ReMDX, which is a tool, which is also open source, that you can use to make slide decks. Maybe I'll pull that over here. Oops. Where are we? Here. And it also has live redoing. Was not created. No, it was. It's all good. OK, that's all I got. Thank you so much.